Guys. Like you said, I'm Hannah. I'm a Spanish teacher in Birmingham, Alabama, and I teach Spanish 1 and 2. And before some of you were getting on, we were talking about what all of our schools kind of look like right now. And across the country, pretty much everyone looks like something different. And what we look like today, a lot of times our school district changes that tomorrow. So I kind of wanted to get an idea of what it looks like in your classroom. How are you guys having communication with your kids? Are you able to have live classes with your kids, or are you just having every once in a while contact with them through Google Classroom or anything? So if you want to put it in the chat box and just kind of type in maybe how you're interacting with your classes, and are you even required to? Is your school going on right now, or are you one of the schools that says we've kind of taken a grade and we're going to move on from there? So I'm just kind of interested because that will kind of guide what we look at today. So it looks like some people, not necessarily all of their students, are required to do lessons, have about a third of the kids participating. Daily lessons in Google Classroom. So we have some Google districts, it looks like. Google Meet, office hours, small group instruction. That's where my school is too, where I'm teaching live classes daily. So I have live class at 10 o'clock for my Spanish 1s and 11 o'clock for my Spanish 2s every day, in addition to Google Classroom. We have some K through 5 teachers. It looks like we have almost all levels. So one of the things that I kind of want to mention is I heard this on a different webinar that I was on, so this is not me wisdom, this is just I'm stealing this from someone else, but they mentioned that right now what we're doing, we're not virtual teaching. We are doing emergency remote teaching. And I think it's really important to stress that, because when teaching virtual, it has a completely different pedagogy that goes with it. And emergency remote teaching is what we're doing right now, where we've kind of been thrown into this and we're all learning from this experience. So it's important that we don't necessarily set our standards so high that we can't possibly meet them. But we also don't want to just assume that, hey, this is just a waste of time and we're not really going to do anything. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. And I am going to attempt to share my screen and show you guys the resources. So you'll tell me if this works. Let's see. Successful? I'm hoping. Yes. Okay. So what I wanted to show you is this is just a little document that kind of keeps me organized and some of the things that we're doing. Hopefully you guys are aware that Pulsera Project started offering all of their resources free, whether people have done the project at their school or not, through the remainder of the school year. Most of you guys probably have clicked on this website and seen this website so far. There's a lot of really cool resources on here. And the stuff at the top, these distance learning activities, these are the ones that I wanted to focus on today and kind of tell you a little bit about. So far in my classroom, the week we went into quarantine was the week that we were supposed to hold our Pulsera sale. And so I was really bummed that we didn't get to do our actual sale at school. But we did end up having a Pulsera week for my classes, so we still included that. So the first thing that I wanted to kind of look at were these cultural activities. So one of the things that our ACTFL core standards that we're supposed to follow, we have those products and practices and perspectives. So I created some activities that are based on these products, practices, and perspectives. I intended them for my level 1 students, but this is a basis that takes our kids into the AP level. So even if they're not in the classroom, they can still be doing some of these activities, and it's really a basic level, something that they can be self-sufficient and do at home on their own. And it's kind of getting those standards ingrained in them, even at the very basic level. So what's really cool about this, a lot of you mentioned that you or Google District compatible. So if you click on these activities, it actually just says, do you want to make a copy? You make a copy of it, and it will give you a copy of the Google form. So this is something that you can immediately put onto your website, and onto your Google Classroom. And it's already embedded with all the videos. There's different questions. So this is the cultural practices. And so they watch this video, a day in the life. You may have used this in your classroom or showed this in your classroom before. And they start looking at, okay, well, why would parents take their child out of school for economic reasons? And so it goes through these different practices. So we have an activity, and these take my students about 15 minutes of time each day. And this was all I posted for about a week for my materials. I'm going to kind of pause right here because when I share my screen, I can't see you guys. So I'm going to head back over here just for a second and see if you guys, since I can't see your faces, anyone have questions? I couldn't watch the chat box while we were talking there for a second. Let's see. Nope, no questions. So I use those. Something else that I didn't ask you guys is, do any of your school districts have limits on how much time your students are allowed to spend online? You can just put it in the chat box or shake your head, yes or no. Some of you guys might be parents too. No, as long as we're keeping it reasonable. 30 minutes per class, that's what mine is too, is 30 minutes a class. But a lot of you, if you have children too, you might be aware that whatever we do online, it takes like double the amount of time it would have taken in the classroom. So I'm definitely cutting back in a lot of the materials that I share with my students. So let's see, I have some other comments that are coming in. Looks like 20 to 45 minutes a day for some classes, 2 to 3 hours total. So looks like all of us are about on the same page, about 30 minutes or about half the workload of what we would normally give. So I loved using this. This was actually my intro week back, our first week out of quarantine. So we are out of quarantine onto virtual education. We had 3 weeks off, and then we started straight with our Pulsera project the first week back. So I assigned this for part of my levels. So I'm going to keep going. I can't see you guys again when I share my screen. So I'm going to share it again and show you my next sort of activities. Oops. Let's see. Here we go. That's still not. Here we go. So I use these products, practices, and perspectives in my level 1 classes. But in my level 2s, I actually had them dig a little bit deeper because my level 2s, they have been exposed to the Pulsera project before. And so they know what the project is. They know specific artists. And I had them work with a very specific artist, and we had these online activities. I am a huge proponent of Google Forms. What I love about Google Forms is that you can share it, like how I'm making this forced copy, but also just organizes everything so clearly. Even if you have a lot of links to share, you might notice that if you're posting something in your Google Classroom, that list of links gets longer and longer and longer. Or if you're using a doc and you're sharing it through a different type of online classroom, it just gets so long with links. So what's really nice about doing it in a form is you can break it up, and I can have one little activity, one little link in each section, something that they watch, something that they do. So my level 2s, they were working with a specific artist and looking at this, but I always have them come back and think about their own culture as well. So this specific activity has students looking at bracelets and materials. So before we even get started, I asked them, well, when you wear bracelets, what are your bracelets made out of? And I get a lot of responses from students. The silicone bracelets are really popular. They'll mention that, or they'll mention metal, different things like that. Well, then I take them down to this site where they start seeing a really cool recycled Pulsera technique. And the kids start writing about, okay, recycled materials, this method of creating bracelets, and how that relates to our culture. I always bring it back to their own culture and have that tied because, again, even as a lower level Spanish student in like a level 1, level 2 class, we can still start building those skills, because in AP, they're going to need to be able to compare and contrast these to their own culture. And it's really cool being able to embed Pulsera project and use that as our connections. We've actually had students write about the Pulsera project on their AP exams before, when they connect it back to things that they're aware of and things that they've been a part of in their school. So these are just some really easy activities. Like I said, these are at the top of the ready-made distance materials. And these are all about 15 minutes each on what they'll take your students to do. And you just click them. It automatically forces you to make a copy of it. And it is ready to go for your Google Classroom. So these are all pretty similar. Again, I will come back to you guys for just a second, and then we'll look at the next one. We good? Any questions? Okay. So the next activity that I have my kids do, and another thing, like I said, we don't necessarily have time, since we lost 3 weeks of school. And at least for me, my district is still requiring us to meet our state standards, and we're still basically continuing with the school year and having class like normal and learning the different topics that we're still supposed to learn. Like in Spanish 2, we're still working on preterite and imperfect, and we're on to our commands unit and doing different things like that. And like I said, everything takes double the time when we go into the virtual environment. So basically what I'm doing is when we teach the commands unit, I'm still embedding it with the Pulsera project. And when I teach colors and adjectives, it's still being embedded. It's just with the Pulsera project as the background. And it's been really neat doing that. It's almost been like my theme for all of this online virtual remote Spanish time. The Pulsera project has kind of been that background, that guiding thread that stayed the same throughout the entire time. So another thing that my students were working on is we were about to go into an assessment, and I basically needed my students to review everything that we had done. This was right at the start, like I said, and we needed to review a lot of the topics that we had done so far this year. So my students made posters. And I would normally do this in the real classroom too. And one of the things that's kind of been my goal this time is to keep things as normal for students as possible. So when I can do the same thing that I would do in the classroom, I try to keep it that way. So typically in the classroom, I would connect students with a specific artist by passing out a bracelet. Now, I don't have bracelets, and we're not in the classroom, and I'm not anywhere near my kids. So it's just not exactly possible. So what I did was I created a little artist sign up. And I just took pictures from the website of different samples of bracelets and different artist names. And I let my kids say, okay, well, I kind of like that bracelet. And they got to sign up to be paired with that specific artist. And when they were paired with that artist, I considered them, that was their artist. They were supporting that artist, and they wanted to do as good of a job as possible for that artist to promote them for the future. Because we do plan on bringing the Pulsera project back to our school next year, and we're going to use these posters as advertisement. So my students chose a specific artist. They signed up for their name right over here, and then I gave them a link, and I said, hey, look at this style of bracelet, and I want you to see if you can find your artist. So the first thing, they just went to this website, they scrolled down, and they thought, oh, that looks like the bracelet that I was assigned, and they found their artist's name. And then this was an assignment for an entire week. So I split this up, and I had different criteria for each day of the week, and I stepped them through exactly what they were doing. But when they started out with this activity. It just looks something like this. And it said, delete any writing that appears in blue after you've completed that square of the chart. And these were all the topics that I needed them to focus on. So we have como era el fondo del video. So I needed them to work on using the imperfecto. and talk about describing what it was like. So I had them describe some background videos. They watched the video on the artist's website, and then they typed about it. They wrote, there was a tree in the background. The house was white. So it was really, really basic sentences, but just embedded with the Pulsera project, because why not embed it with Pulsera project? I had things like quién es o quién era, again, trying to use that imperfecto. Who is the most important person for them? And then a big part of this was ¿cuál es su plan para el futuro? It was a little bit of a stretch here, but I needed them to work on using some of those commands. So I got them to find on the Pulsera website, what is it that this artist wants to do? What are they working for? And what are 3 pieces of advice? So I had students write things like, work hard in school, study a lot, keep making pulseras. So I had them make little commands, and this is something that is so easy to adjust into your classroom. It's literally just a grid, and you can just take this and whatever you're working on, I have this adjusted for both my level 1 and my level 2 students, and just take those topics that you think they need to practice with. If you're doing present progressive, you can have what were they doing in the video, or any sort of topic can be embedded with the Pulsera project. So that was another thing that I have done. And this was, this project was, like I said, a week-long project. And it was something that I did for review right before. We're still giving assessments. They're not really tests and quizzes, but we're doing a lot of writing. And this was basically the project that led up to the assessment to practice all of these different skills. You also notice in the middle, there's a QR code. And if you scan that, that's actually my student's voice, because I'm still trying to get all the different modes of communication. So in my live classes, we do our interpersonal communication, but this was an example of some presentational speaking where they just recorded their voice. They talked about their artist and said everything they could. I told them to just record for about 30 seconds to a minute, anything you could possibly tell me about your artist. So this is another activity that I did with my students. Okay. Pause there for a second. I think I see that something might have come in the chat, but I'm not quite sure. Any questions so far? Make sure to pause me. You can also unmute your mic if you have anything. Just stop me and let me know. Okay, I will keep going then. I know I'm throwing tons of information at you at the same time. Okay, someone said, I like the idea of using posters as advertisements. Do you think any teachers use Seesaw, upper levels? That can be for everyone. Anyone use Seesaw? Let's see, that question came from Elizabeth. Looks like Maureen uses it as well. These would be great on Seesaw. Let's see, Elizabeth, do you want to unmute and talk about how you use Seesaw?
I'm seeing K through 2 primarily using Seesaw, but I was just wondering if any upper levels were using Seesaw. I'm a support teacher now because I'm ESL. I'm sort of watching what things are developing across the different ages, but that's what I see first and second graders doing on Seesaw would be beautiful on there for kids to be able to, you know.
Yeah.
And I just don't know if I think about like the Spanish teachers in the USA site or whatever, you know, I just don't know what percentage of upper level teachers are using that, if it would be worth putting these out in the Seesaw format.
That would be an interesting thought. I can get with you maybe, and we can see if you think that might be a good idea to pursue that. And I saw someone mention Vocaroo. I use Seesaw instead of Vocaroo in middle school. Okay, yeah, and Vocaroo is where that QR code, if you're unfamiliar, the site that produces the QR code that I was using was Vocaroo. Okay, we will keep going. Okay, so another activity, the first really new topic that I needed to cover with my students, and that was kind of where I was worried the most and stressed out the most. I got really lucky in that we started this online remote learning we started in the middle of a unit for both my Spanish 1s and my Spanish 2s. So I felt really, really good that the first couple weeks I was able to just build on what we had already done in the classroom. But then after that, I kind of had no basis on what we were going on. We were starting entirely new topics. And so that's also why I kept the Pulsera project, because I was confident in my abilities of knowing what I was doing with Pulsera project. And I needed something that I felt good about. And I'm like, okay, well, how can I merge what this Pulsera project with this new material that I have to learn? The other part of this is my Spanish 1s. It made me so, so sad that most of my Spanish 1s are 9th graders. So they have no concept of what the Pulsera project really is. So I needed to make sure that my students coming up next year, that we make our Pulsera sale as strong as we possibly can and get my kids as excited as possible about it. So what I did was we had to start working on, we had colors and adjectives to talk about because we hadn't done colors yet. And then we were also getting to more advanced levels of writing as well. So we started doing compound sentences. So what I did is I literally just scoured the Facebook page and found all the coolest Pulseras that I possibly could, and I put them into one document. And so I showed these to my kids, and this is how we introduced compound sentences. So I had them take things like, we spent so much time talking about the Pokemon bracelets. I cannot even tell you how many days we talked about Pokemon and these Pulseras in the middle. But we did everything from the Pulsera that is yellow has Pikachu. And we were just doing little basic sentences. And I taught compounds through these. And there's just so much to work on that it really gives the kids a lot to look at. And they could choose something different every day. So that's another thing that I have learned in this remote style of learning, is just the repetition of doing the same pattern of the same thing every single day. And so I will do it in the same way for an entire week. And then after that week for me, then I do an assessment, but it's in almost the exact same style. So every single day I had kids choose a different bracelet, and they would write some compound sentences about it, describing colors, describing what it looks like. And then we got to the point, one thing, I know someone else mentioned that they are using Google Meet for office hours. That's what we're using as well. And so I have a Google Meet classroom, and we'll all start out in one classroom, but then I also will give them a little subgroup password. So I'll just call out and be like, hey, you, and you, you're going to go to the room with the password this. And I have them leave my main room, and they go to a sub classroom, and they have small group conversations. And I have them just pick out a Pulsera, and they would start talking about it. And I record we're actually required by our school to record all of our sessions, but I record them too. And that's kind of how I gave them their grade for participating that day, was by listening back to their conversations. And I didn't intend for it, but it was kind of a happy accident where they would start describing a Pulsera, and then they ended up playing a guessing game with it. So they would describe something, and they would try to figure out which one it was. And so that was really cool. And we spent an entire week doing that. But what was cool was that was meeting our new standard. And we were doing our compound sentences. We were working on adjective agreement. I also, if you're familiar with Las Pulseras que hace mamá, the animated series that has been made by Pulsera Project, it might be like originally intended for younger levels, for elementary school kids, but that's actually what I ended up using with my high schoolers. So up to my 18-year-olds were watching that. And that was how I had them learn colors in Spanish, because we don't learn colors until the very end of the year. So I had my students learn colors that way. As they watched the video, anytime they heard something, they wrote it down. So if they thought they heard a color, they wrote that down. And if And then at the end, we kind of checked them. So that was a big thing that we worked on. So we used Pulsera Project to learn colors in our compound sentences. Again, I'm going to pause, kind of look at you guys, maybe, if I can find you. There you are. Okay, I see some people saying Meet's definitely not up to the standard of Zoom. I completely agree. Zoom has their break room, and I love that feature. Unfortunately, my school's a Google district, so we're not allowed to use Zoom with our kids. So I'm thinking, let's see. So someone said they're not familiar with Google Meet. Google Meet is just Zoom by Google. It's the exact same thing. It just isn't quite as user-friendly. They don't have as many features. It's a newer platform, I think. So it's not as detailed as Zoom. There's a lot more features in Zoom that's not in Google Classroom. Let's see, I hear some typing, so I'm not sure if more questions are coming. So oh, here we go. How many of the activities would work for social studies as they are right now? A lot of the activities, so I actually posted, I'm in one of the Facebook groups for Spanish teachers, and I posted some of the stuff that I've made for Pulsera there, and I mentioned it just as global citizenship and kind of promoting that aspect of education as well. And it actually did get shared with some of their history classes. So they, it was someone else who had mentioned that they kind of partnered during virtual week with their history classes. And so the Spanish teachers did part of the Pulsera project, and then the history teachers used some different aspects. So yeah, I do think it could be used in history classes and social studies in that way as well. Oh, someone else uses the Las Pulseras que hace mamá with their high schoolers too. Let's see, can we help by sharing that way? Yeah, feel free to share anything, any of these materials. A lot of them are available online. Share that link that, let's see, at the top of my page, the pulseraproject.org/free materials. You can share that, and a lot of these resources are available on there. I think the main thing is just keeping in mind that we have to do the best that we can with the resources we have right now. We don't have to kind of overwhelm ourselves and feel like we have to make all of these new, completely brand new things. We can embed the Pulsera project with what we're already doing. And like I said, just these compound sentences and teaching colors. I've never taught it in this way before, but I just felt more comfortable and more familiar with this. And I just embedded it into what I'm already doing. So I'm gonna head back over here, and I want to show you. So I was telling you guys that I spent about an entire week, and we just finished this last week. I spent an entire week of just the same thing almost every single day, choosing different pulseras, having the kids talk about it with each other, having them write about it, describe it. We went through all different sorts of modes of communication. And then ultimately, my school is still requiring that we have grades, and we have to have weekly grades. So what I personally do is we do a lot of work leading up to the end of the week, and that is for a participation grade. So if you're participating and you're doing what you can, then you get your grade there. Now, I do not require my kids to come to live class. Only a small portion of them come to live class. I am in a very diverse district, so we have students who range all the way from not having any Wi-Fi at their homes to very, very well-off areas of town. So we have a lot of diversity. I also cannot require live just because we actually retrofitted all of our buses. So our school system changed our buses into Wi-Fi hotspots. So our buses travel the same bus routes that they normally would in the mornings. They travel them all day long. And then they get Wi-Fi to different areas of, so all of our kids have Wi-Fi at different times of the day. So I can't require them to necessarily be on at one certain time just because the Wi-Fi bus might not get to them until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I do have a not live option for my kids as well. But ultimately what my kids made was I had them design their own pulsera, And this is something that I have done in the classroom before, but then I had them write about their pulseras in the same way that they had been writing about the pulseras that they had seen my little best of slides. So I had things like this student, and this one on top I just absolutely loved because this was actually written by one of my ELL students. She speaks Turkish, and she struggles a lot in my class. She has a very, very hard time. But she worked so hard on this pulsera, and she wanted to tie it back into her own culture. And she talked to me a little bit about, she was talking about like Turkish colors and different symbolism of flowers in Turkey. And it was just really cool getting to see the kids express themselves through these pulseras and then write about them. So we wrote the compound sentences, and we worked a lot on adjective agreement. Are they perfect? Completely not. But this was a brand new skill. This was the first new skill that my kids got during this remote Spanish time. These compound sentences and working on this adjective agreement. So overall, I was super pleased. I did allow my students, I actually just went to the Pulsera website, and one of the posters that you can print out, you might be familiar that you can print out posters in black and white or colors. So I just printed one of the black and white options, and the kids could use those as well, and they could design on top of there. I loved this one where she made it the beach because that's where she wanted to be right now. So she wished that she could go to the beach. And then I thought it was cool that some of the kids, they really took it to heart, and he was like, well, I wanted to make a mix of the cuero and the mayamam. And so this was his drawing of a depiction of if a bracelet that was el cuero and the mayamam categories combined. That was what he thought. You can definitely see where my girls differ from my boys. My girls are all going to the beach and have flowers. My boys are all eating. So I had so many food bracelets that it was hilarious after a while how much food I got in their pulseras. But, so this was ultimately their final assessment grade for that week. It was like a little 30-point project. So for me, it was 15 points for designing and coloring your pulsera in a meaningful way. And then it was 15 more points for the written aspect of this as well. So I try to combine each week where I have something that is, I don't want my kids always on the computer. And that's been a hard thing for me because I know I'm at this point just so exhausted of being on the computer all the time. And so I'm trying every single week to give my kids a little bit of a break from designing. Like we're doing the driving unit in my Spanish 2 classes right now. And so, I'm having them print out and make little cars and different stuff. So every week I try to have them do something that's not on a computer, just coloring, designing, and kind of letting go and being a little bit more free and open. So this was my next activity. Again, I'm going to come back to you guys. I love the Wi-Fi bus idea. Sounds like your district's doing an amazing job. Yeah, that was pretty funny. When we heard about the Wi-Fi buses, we're like, oh my gosh, that was a genius idea. So yeah, we have those that drive around our district every day. When you see the school buses running, there's no one on it, but we have our kids still getting Wi-Fi. Okay, so another thing that I have made, and this is from the very start of this quarantine time. At the very beginning of this, in some districts, it sounds like some of you guys are in the same boat. At the very beginning of this, our schools were very, very concerned about equity and making sure that all of our kids had equal access. And they wanted to make sure that we weren't teaching while another student got behind. So for about 3 weeks, we were not allowed to teach any new material. We were allowed to provide access to resources, but we could not expect anyone to do anything. We could not require them to do anything, and we couldn't give any grades. So basically, I had to do something that was fun enough that my kids would actually do it and try to keep up those Spanish skills and keep up these skills that we do in the classroom. But also something that they wouldn't get behind on, and just that they would enjoy doing. So one of my big passions is escape rooms. I absolutely love going to escape rooms. If you are not familiar with it, the whole idea is that you have some sort of premise and you are trying to escape from that room. Now, in the real classroom, the physical classroom, obviously we can't lock our kids in a room and just kind of let them have a free-for-all and Lord of the Flies it and hope that they all survive. So how it works in the classroom is you have a lockbox and you try to get into the lockbox. So right before all of this, back in I think January-ish, I designed a physical breakout room for the Pulsera project, which will be so much fun when we're able to be back in the classroom. But like I said, my Pulsera sale was supposed to be the week we came back from spring break. And I never got to do that. So I'm like, okay, well, let's design a digital breakout room, a digital escape room. And as my motto basically is I try to keep it the same for my classes as it would be if we were in the classroom. So I ended up designing this site. And I wanted to use this for both my level 1 and level 2. And like someone else had mentioned, I also want it to be applicable to everyone. So it is in English. And this is one of those activities that really focuses on global citizenship and uses Pulsera as the background of it. And this is probably, excuse me, this is probably my favorite resource just because I love games and I think that students love games as well and that they learn so much faster when they do something in a gaming environment than when they do it just in a traditional environment. Something about escape room games is that it's like they're not afraid to fail. If they get the lock wrong, then all they do is they're like, oh, it was wrong, and they keep trying again. So it's really cool to allow them that opportunity. This one, you can see over on the left-hand side, we have our locks. So it's the same idea. You're just typing in your answers instead of putting them into a lockbox. So all of these are hidden all across the site. In a real classroom, you would be looking around the classroom, the kids would be destroying the room, trying to find clues. Well, on here, they can't do that. So everything is hidden inside this site. So if they click on different things, there's different hidden links. So it says, there's a little link at the top and it tells you that an earthquake has hit. So all I do is down here, we say, oh, time to clean up your desk after the earthquake. And there's some hidden stuff inside these links that give them clues to unlock this. And as they go, every single one of these locks is based on a different key component of the Pulsera project's educational philosophy. So it's teaching students about global citizenship while they learn. And they have to get different components right in order to move on in the game. So for example, I'm gonna kind of cheat and show you a little bit of the game. If you see over here, we have a bit of a computer. And when you click on it, it opens up a slide and it says forms of bias. And it just has some different definitions here. And the students are gonna click here and originally they're gonna think, okay, they have to use their they have to use their critical thinking skills. They're like, this doesn't really mean much to me right now. So there's a little hint in the corner. There's a little text message that's come in and says, make sure you talk about, who knows? So if they go back to this same picture, well, a text message is going to come from a phone. So if they click on the phone, there's the rest of the text message is going to load. So make sure you talk about outcome bias, choice supported bias, confirmation bias, zero risk bias. So it's a fun way. Now they're going back here. They're like, I wonder which one is confirmation bias. Tendency to accept information that confirms existing understanding. So when they get this in order, you might notice these all have numbers. Those numbers go in a specific order. So confirmation bias was the first one. So the answer for the number lock, the first number is going to be the number 3. And when they type this into the lock, eventually that lock is going to unlock. So they just type in these numbers and they'll get to a certain page. And what's really cool for you guys is I have it set that upon completion of the game, it actually has a section where your student can type in your email address and it will auto send an email to you with a certificate that that student completed the game. So anyone can know that their student actually did complete this game. And if they completed this game, then they really have these 4 core values. They know what these 4 core values are. They have an understanding of these different fair trade principles and different things that they're having to use throughout the entire game. So I'm going to pause right there. There might be a lot of questions on that one. I'm not sure. So I'll go back. Let's see. So have my students did it and enjoyed it. Good work putting together. That must have taken forever. I've gotten pretty fast at them now. It took me about the first day of quarantine, I already was like, okay, I can't just sit in this house and do nothing. So it took me a couple of days of quarantine to get it all figured out, but I had it done in about 4 or 5 days. It was finished. Yeah, the whole Pulsera team did finish it. There was one part on there that is really pretty tricky. And there's a hint sheet for teachers. So if you guys need any hint sheets, that's already created. Just ask and we can get those answers to you and we'll explain the whole game. But I highly recommend playing it first because it's a lot of fun. I think it's a lot of fun. So let's see, it looks like a dog is visiting and stepped on the keyboard before he got to finish. What platform do you design that in online? So it looks like, let's see, what platform do you design online? I'm guessing you're talking about the game. I design all the games in Google websites, in sites.google.com. And I personally choose to use old Google sites just because there's a lot more features. There's a lot more features, a lot more that you can do with it. You can also do a little bit more of HTML coding and different stuff in that one. And new sites is really intuitive and it's very easy to use, but I can't have as many features. So I use old Google sites. So I do want to open up at this time and check and see what you guys are doing in your classroom. If any of you guys have been able to use Pulsera web sources on your virtual learning, or maybe anything you want to add to this. And you can just unmute your mic if you have questions and want to add something. Let's see, some messages are going into the chat box. Does anyone have any questions on applying this in their classroom or how to get access to anything? Let's see. So someone said, Maureen just said, just completed the housing unit and was thinking about a way to incorporate the Pulsera project into that housing unit. That would be I personally think that you can incorporate Pulsera project into pretty much everything that you do. And especially a lot of the videos, if you looking at the backgrounds, that's one of my favorite things to do with Pulsera project. My kids notice so many things that I don't even notice. There's one video, I can't remember which one it is. It has a PlayStation logo in the background. And so the kids just pick up on these things. And so that would be really cool to maybe tie that in with looking at the backgrounds, looking at the housing. There are some specific videos too about housing that you can use as well during that unit. So you might have already seen those and use those videos too.
So Hannah, this is Kathy McCauley. I just want to say I am blown away. The material you produced is just stellar. I was mentioning to Chris earlier that with how rapid this all happened and then the unknowing of do we teach new curriculum or not, I kept on seeing the posts and I would look at things, but I think everyone's been spread so thin with just trying to figure out what to do. And I have a department of 11 faculty in world language, so it's just been super crazy. But looking forward and not knowing what we have happening in the fall, right? Like ultimately, fingers crossed, we're in school face-to-face with our kids. I'm even thinking this isn't just for our circumstances right now as we, oh, my son, Stop. Sorry. Moving forward, this is something that I think also with our classes, you could even, while you're instructing, these could be phenomenal enrichment, homework, things that the kids could be working on. This is going to enhance any teacher's library and resource bank exponentially. So I think even moving forward and being able to help spread like how great this stuff is and how user-friendly it is going to be great for teachers all over the country.
That was definitely my goal, was to make something that could just easily be shared with other people and can easily be incorporated in classroom. The very first things that I showed you guys, those Google Forms, the little 15-minute activities, typically I use that as homework. So the week before our Pulsera sale, those are my homework assignments. So I have 2 sets of 3, basically, one for my Spanish 1s, one for my Spanish 2s. And so I use those during the normal years, but they have ended up becoming my curriculum for this non-traditional year as well. I appreciate that, Kathy. Thanks.
I also like to see how you integrated throughout the curriculum and nothing's really taught in isolation. So you're not trying to necessarily isolate the grammatical structures, but you're trying to interweave it into things, which I think is great because I'm trying to move more towards like comprehensible input type instruction. But then I also really am dedicated to using the Pulsera project. So when that time, luckily we got our sale in literally right before we closed. It was great. We got our, I mean, tech was a little delayed, but literally we closed right before school closed. So the kids were awesome tying it down, but I was just like, you know, I did all this stuff leading up to it. And I just felt like part of it was missing. Like we were all of a sudden kind of taking a curriculum break in order for me to lead up to it. And this just gives me a new perspective on how to interweave it with things. So moving forward, it definitely gives me another outlook.
Yeah, it definitely is good for, we don't have time to just stop and do something completely new. And I don't know about you guys for your state, but Alabama, we just adopted new course curriculum. I guess it's been a year, or I guess it's about 2 years at this point. We got brand new curriculum. So we are aligned with the ACTFL guidelines now. So we are very proficiency-based learning, which has been, it's been a shift. That's been a hard shift to make to truly being proficiency-based learning. And this has just been something that's been so cool that I love that the Pulsera project gives my students a purpose. And when I interweave it with the grammar and the things that we're doing that maybe in the old non-proficiency way wouldn't have seemed as fun, this really helps my students realize, okay, there's a purpose behind learning Spanish right now because I'm actually connected with these different artists. My favorite thing, I always do this in April with my students, which is for me at least one of the rougher times of the year because we've made it past spring break. We have no more breaks remaining in the year. And so we have the remaining year to kind of finish out. The kids are exhausted. I'm usually exhausted. And sometimes it's kind of when things just start getting frustrating and rough at school. And doing the Pulsera project in April always restores my faith in my students because they get connected to these artists. So that poster project that I showed you guys, I actually use that every year. I had to adjust it a lot this year to make those little boxes align with what we were really doing. And I just change those boxes up every single year to match what we've actually learned in class. And I do it as a review for whatever test is coming up right around Pulsera time. But what's been really cool, and I just love the way that the artist website is set up because it starts out, the interview questions start out with a lot more basic information. And so it's the things that my Spanish ones can really understand. We have the where people live. We have how old they are, their favorite colors, their family, those really Spanish 1E things. But as you go down, it gets more and more complex. And like the last questions I noticed, the last questions are always have subjunctive in them. And so it definitely is more of like the AP mindset kind of towards the bottom. And what's been super cool for my kids is that they have just gotten so connected with a specific artist that year after year, they actually end up choosing the exact same artist every single year. So I'll pass out the bracelets in the classroom, like, choose your artist. Who do you want to be paired with? And they're like, oh, I had him last year. This is who I have to choose again. And my kids just get so excited and love it. And I can't even remember which artist it was, but one of my kids was just so thrilled because she had a bracelet and the artist, he had a picture on it, just like all the bracelets have it. But her second year, she noticed that the picture had a baby in the picture with him too. And I cannot tell you how excited this little 15-year-old girl was that he had a baby. And she was just so ecstatic. And the kids get connected with their artists. They also end up, for my school, they start like really promoting their specific artists. So they're like, oh, he's the best. He's working for chickens, or he's the best. Did you know he's trying to learn how to drive and be a driver? And they learn their artists and they share it with their teachers. I've caught them catching their teachers in the hall. They're like, hey, Mr. So-and-so, you have to buy this bracelet. He likes soccer just like you do. And so they'll catch their teachers and they'll force their teachers into buying bracelets, which is great for me. They do that and they just really get connected with it. So I love doing that aspect and just letting them have that connections with someone, which is one of those ACTFL standards, that cultural connection, which for me is one of those hardest to meet ones, because at least in my district, and especially now it's going to be harder, we're not even allowed to leave the school. So we can't leave the school. We can't travel around the country. They've blocked a lot of travel for us. We can't even do stuff over the summer. So making these connections to another country through the Pulsera project is the way that we meet that core standard.